This is a tutorial to make a simple REST API using Node.js and MongoDB. So first, we're going to have a directory structure looking something like this. This excludes our Node modules, and for those, we want to install Body Parser, Express, Mongoose, and NodeDaemon. We'll first take a look at model.js. Model.js defines the schema we'll use in our application, and for this tutorial, we'll look at Pokemon. So each Pokemon in our database will have a name of type string and a type of type string, and then we'll export the schema itself. Next, we'll take a look at controller. Controller defines the functions that we want to use to handle each of our API endpoints. So we'll have 5 functions, each exported individually, which takes a request and response object as their parameters, which is specified by the Express framework. So let's take a look at just a few of these. So getAllPokemon does a find query on the Pokemon model, and it specifies basically nothing, which is kind of like a select all. So the second argument of this function is a error first callback function. And if there's no error, then we know that we have successfully retrieved all our Pokemon in our database, and we can respond to the user with the Pokemon. Our function getOnePokemon is very similar, except it calls find by ID, which, as the name implies, finds a specific Pokemon by ID, which we specify in our request parameters. Add Pokemon, update Pokemon, delete Pokemon, basically do as the name implies. Add Pokemon creates a Pokemon and saves it to the database. Update Pokemon finds a Pokemon in the database and then updates it using the ID and data we specify in a request. And delete Pokemon just deletes a Pokemon from the database. And all of these functions take an error first callback. Well, the inner implementations take an error first callback and respond with a Pokemon of interest if the query was successful. Now let's take a look at routes. So routes exports a single function, which takes the app as a parameter. It declares the routes we want to declare on the app, which is Pokemon and Pokemon/ID. A route is essentially just the endpoint of our API. And then we also specify the methods we want to allow to be used on each endpoint and their respective handlers, which we covered in controller. And finally, we'll look at server.js. So server.js does a lot of setup for the first half up until about line 13. And then we initialize our Express application, decide on a port, and then we attach our body parser to better handle JSON to our application, and then our routes to our application. And remember that our routes exported a function which took an app as an argument, and that's why we're calling the routes function. And then finally, we have our app listen to the port we specified on. So we can start the server up by npm start, and as we can see, API server is listening on port 3000. So first, let's take a look at what's in our API server. So curl localhost. Okay, so we have one Pokemon in our database already. It's a Charmander. And let's see if we can maybe add another Pokemon. So curl data, let's say it's a Bulbasaur. So we get response from our application with the Pokemon we just entered. And as we can see, now there are 2 Pokemon in the database. So that was calling the getAllPokemon and then add Pokemon. Now let's see what happens if we want to just query the Bulbasaur we entered. So that would be curl localhost. And the getOnePokemon endpoint was defined on Pokemon/ID. And indeed, we do get the Bulbasaur back, which we had specified. And now let's take a look at what happens if we want to delete a Pokemon. So curl request. And remember, we just have to specify the ID. So one Pokemon deleted, and then let's try to delete our Charmander. Nice. And finally, just to double check, indeed, there are no Pokemon left. Thank you for watching.